AITA for refusing to take out a $75,000 loan to fund my brother's wedding when my family says his work elevates food while I just raise fish? Original post. I'm sitting in my truck right now at the hatchery, typing this on my phone because I can't stop shaking and I need someone to tell me if I'm the crazy one here. I'm 33M, and I've worked in aquaculture for 11 years. For the last 6, I've been the manager of a sustainable fish hatchery that supplies trout, salmon, and other species to restaurants, conservation programs, and recreational fishing operations across 3 states. I have a master's degree in fisheries biology. I've published papers on sustainable population management. Last year, our hatchery received recognition from the State Environmental Agency for our work in restoring wild salmon populations in rivers that were nearly dead a decade ago. None of this matters to my family. My brother Derek is 29, and he works as a sous chef at a trendy farm-to-table restaurant in the city. He's talented, I won't take that away from him. He can do things with a pan that genuinely impress me. But somewhere along the way, my parents decided that what Derek does is art, and what I do is, I don't even know, grunt work. Blue-collar nonsense that their oldest son unfortunately fell into? Growing up, Derek was always the creative one, and I was the practical one, which is parent speak for the one whose accomplishments don't photograph well for Facebook. When Derek got his first line cook job at 19, my parents threw him a party. When I defended my master's thesis on sustainable hatchery practices that could help prevent species collapse, my mom asked if I could explain it simply, and then change the subject to Derek's new knife set. I've made peace with this. Or I thought I had. 3 weeks ago, Derek announced his engagement to his girlfriend Maya, who's also a chef at the same restaurant. My parents were over the moon. The wedding is planned for next fall, and they want to do this whole elaborate farm-to-table celebration at a venue outside the city. Fresh ingredients, locally sourced everything, a celebration of food as art. The estimated cost? About $180,000. Derek and Maya can't afford that. They're line cooks, not executive chefs. They have student loans. My parents are retired and living on fixed income. They said they could contribute maybe $30,000 from their savings, but that's it. So last Sunday, at what I thought was a casual family dinner, my parents sat me down and presented their solution. I should take out a $75,000 loan to help fund the wedding. I actually laughed. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. My dad launched into this speech about how Derek's wedding is once in a lifetime, and how it needs to reflect who he is as an artist. My mom talked about how the wedding would be featured in a local food magazine, and how this could launch Derek's career. And then she said the thing that's been echoing in my head ever since. Marcus, you have good credit and a stable job. Derek elevates ingredients into art. You raise fish. It's good work, honey, but it's not the same. Derek needs this. His work deserves to be celebrated properly. I just sat there. Derek, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. He mumbled something about how they didn't have to ask me, but he didn't actually tell them to stop. I tried to explain, calmly, because that's what I do, I stay calm, that my work isn't just raising fish. I told them about the conservation programs, about how our hatchery has helped restore runs in rivers where salmon hadn't spawned naturally in 40 years. I explained that farm-to-table restaurants like the one Derek works at, they rely on sustainable fisheries. Without people like me doing this work, there wouldn't be fresh, responsibly sourced fish for chefs to elevate. My mom actually sighed, like I was being tedious. Marcus, we're not saying your job isn't useful. But it's not creative. Derek transforms things. He creates experiences. You just maintain populations. I maintained populations so that rivers didn't die. I maintained populations so that ecosystems could recover. I maintained populations so that future generations could see wild salmon runs instead of just reading about them in history books. Just maintaining populations has been my life's work. And apparently it's worth less than a $180,000 party. I told them no. I said I wasn't going to take on $75,000 in debt for a wedding, especially when I wasn't even asked if I wanted to help. I was told that I would. My dad got angry. He said I was being selfish, that I was jealous of Derek's success, that I'd always resented how talented he was. That one hurt. Because I don't resent Derek. I've always supported him. I've eaten at his restaurant a dozen times. I've talked him up to everyone I know. I've never once asked him to acknowledge what I do or to thank me for the fish his restaurant probably buys from suppliers connected to operations like mine. The dinner ended badly. My mom cried. Derek wouldn't look at me. Maya was silent the entire time, just watching everything unfold. I left, and I've barely talked to any of them since. My parents have texted me every day. The messages started out guilting, "We just want Derek to be happy," and have escalated to angry, "You're destroying this family over money." Derek sent me one message that said, "I didn't ask them to do this, but I really could use your help, man." I haven't responded. Here's the thing, I could afford the loan. My credit is excellent. I've saved aggressively. But $75,000 is not a small amount, and I'm trying to save for my own future. Maybe a house, maybe my own small-scale sustainable operation someday. Why should I derail my financial goals to fund a wedding that exists primarily to showcase my brother's career, for a family that has never once acknowledged mine? But I also can't stop hearing my mom's voice. "You just raise fish." Am I the asshole for refusing? Edit. I need to step away. My mentor at the hatchery just came by my truck and asked if I was okay. Apparently, I've been sitting here for 2 hours. I showed him this post and he wants to talk. I'll update when I can. Update 1, 3 days later. I didn't expect so many responses. I've read through hundreds of comments over the past few days, and I want to thank everyone who took the time to validate what I was feeling. A lot of you said things I needed to hear. But the most important conversation I had was with Harold. Harold is 67 years old. He's been in aquaculture his entire adult life. He founded the hatchery I now manage, and even though he's technically retired, he still comes in several times a week to check on the tanks, mentor younger staff, and remind us all that we're doing sacred work. That's what he calls it. Sacred work. When he found me in my truck that day, he didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, waiting, because Harold is patient the way rivers are patient. When I finally told him what happened, he got this look on his face that I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something deeper. "Come walk with me," he said. We walked out to the rearing ponds, where the juvenile salmon were preparing for their release into the river system. Thousands of small silver bodies, schooling together, learning the behaviors they'd need to survive. In a few weeks, we'd transport them to the release site and watch them swim away into water that their ancestors had been swimming for 10,000 years before industrial pollution nearly erased them. Harold stopped at the edge of the pond and watched them for a long time. "Marcus," he finally said, "do you know why I started this hatchery?" I didn't. In 6 years of working with him, I'd never asked. In 1982, I watched the last wild salmon run in the Clearwater River. There were 17 fish. 17. My grandfather told me stories about runs so thick you could walk across the river on their backs. And I watched 17 fish try to spawn in water that was too warm, too degraded, too damaged by everything we'd done. By the next year, there were none. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were wet. I started this hatchery because I couldn't save those fish. But I could raise their children. I could bring them back, one generation at a time. And you, he pointed at me, you've helped make that happen. The Clearwater had its first natural spawn in 41 years last season. Because of our fish. Because of your work. He put his hand on my shoulder. What your mother said to you. That's not honest assessment, son. That's emotional abuse. It's a parent telling their child that the thing they've devoted their life to doesn't matter. And that's a lie. It's a lie designed to make you small so they don't have to acknowledge their own failures. I started crying. I'm not ashamed to admit that. Standing at the edge of that pond, watching those fish swim in circles, I cried for the first time in years. Your work matters, Harold said. It matters more than any single meal, any single restaurant, any single wedding. You're not raising fish. You're healing the world, one generation at a time. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your grief. We stood there for another hour. Harold told me more stories about the early days, about fighting for permits, about skeptics who said restoration was impossible, about the first time he saw a wild fish return to a river his hatchery had helped restore. He told me about his own family, how his wife had supported him even when no one else did, and how he'd had to cut off contact with a brother who'd belittled him his entire life. Boundaries aren't cruelty, he said. They're survival. You can love someone and still refuse to let them diminish you. Before I left that day, Harold gave me a framed photo from his office, a picture of the first salmon run in the restored Clearwater River, taken last year. Dozens of fish, fighting their way upstream to spawn. Put that somewhere, you'll see it every day, he said. And when your family tells you that you just raise fish, remember what you're really doing. The photo is hanging in my apartment now, right next to my degrees. I still haven't responded to my family's messages, but something has shifted in me. I'm not angry anymore. I'm clear. I know what my work is worth. And I know what I'm going to do. Update 2, 2 weeks later. I met with my parents and Derek last weekend. Maya was there too. I asked for the meeting because I wanted to handle this properly. Not through texts, not through avoidance, but face to face. I won't pretend I wasn't nervous. I spent 3 days preparing what I wanted to say. I even wrote it down so I wouldn't lose my nerve. We met at my parents' house. My mom offered me coffee. My dad sat with his arms crossed, already defensive. Derek looked exhausted, like he hadn't been sleeping. Maya sat next to him, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. I started by thanking them for coming. I've done a lot of thinking since our last conversation, I said. And I need to tell you some things that I've been holding in for a very long time. My dad started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. Please. I need to say this. He went quiet. I told them about the hatchery. Not the technical details, they'd never cared about those, but what it meant. I told them about the Clearwater River, about the 17 fish, about the 41 years of absence and the first natural spawn. I told them about the letters we get from conservation groups and schools and tribal nations thanking us for our work. I told them about the ecosystems we've helped heal, the species we've helped save, the rivers we've helped bring back to life. You've called me the fish guy for as long as I can remember, I said. Like it's a joke. Like what I do is lesser. But do you know what happens when hatcheries like mine disappear? When people decide that raising fish isn't important enough to fund or support. I pulled out my phone and showed them pictures, before and after shots of rivers, population graphs, an article about a fishery collapse in another state that had devastated the local seafood industry. Farm to table isn't just about the farm, I said. It's about every link in the chain. Derek's restaurant, the trout on his menu. There's a good chance those fish came from an operation like mine, or were made possible by conservation work like mine. You can't celebrate chefs who elevate ingredients while dismissing the people who make sure those ingredients exist. My mom looked uncomfortable. My dad's arms were still crossed, but something in his expression had shifted. I'm not going to take out a $75,000 loan for Derek's wedding, I said. Not because I don't love Derek, and not because I'm jealous of his career. But because asking me to fund a celebration of his work while treating my work as worthless is not something I can support. It's not okay. It has never been okay. I took a breath. I've spent my whole life trying to earn recognition from this family. I'm done. My work speaks for itself, even if you never listen. And I'm setting a boundary now. I will not be diminished anymore. I will not be just the fish guy. I am a scientist, a conservationist, and someone who's devoted his life to work that matters. You can accept that, or we can be done here. But I won't apologize for refusing to fund someone else's celebration while being told my own contributions are beneath notice. The silence after I finished was heavy. Derek was the first one to speak. Marcus, But it was Maya who cut him off. Wait, she said. She was looking at me differently now, with something like recognition. You work in sustainable hatchery management? Like actual restoration ecology? I nodded. She turned to Derek. Do you know how hard it is to source sustainable seafood? Do you have any idea how many farm-to-table restaurants are just greenwashing because there's no infrastructure for actual sustainable aquaculture? Derek looked confused. I mean, we get fish from distributors, Maya said. Who get it from who knows where. But if there were actual partnerships with operations like his, she pointed at me, that would be revolutionary. That's what the whole movement is supposed to be about. Local, sustainable, traceable from source to plate. She turned back to me. I had no idea. Derek talks about you sometimes, but he always said you were just the fish guy, I finished. Maya's face flushed with what looked like shame. I'm sorry. I should have asked. I should have known better. My mom started to say something defensive about how they'd always supported both their sons, but Maya wasn't having it. No, she said firmly. No, this is actually important. Mrs. Chen, do you understand that without sustainable fisheries, the entire culinary movement Derek and I are part of collapses? You can't elevate ingredients that don't exist. You can't source locally when there's nothing left to source. What Marcus does isn't supporting work, it's foundational work. It's the whole foundation. I've never seen my mother speechless before. Maya turned to Derek. We need to talk. Really talk. About how we've been treating your brother and about how we think about food and our work and a lot of things. Derek nodded slowly. He looked like someone who was just beginning to understand something he'd never questioned before. I'm not asking for the loan, he said to me. I'm not. I never wanted to ask you like that. Mom and Dad suggested it, and I just went along with it. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. We talked for another hour. No decisions were made, but something had cracked open. Maya asked me genuine questions about the hatchery, how it operated, what species we worked with, how the restoration programs functioned. She took notes on her phone. My parents mostly listened, looking uncomfortable. When I left, Maya followed me out to my truck. I meant what I said in there, she told me. I think Derek needs to understand where ingredients actually come from. Not just the farms, but the whole system. And I think he needs therapy, honestly. His whole identity is wrapped up in being the talented one, and I don't think that's healthy for him or fair to you. I didn't disagree. I'm going to push for that, she said. And I'm going to push for us to rethink this wedding. It doesn't need to be $180,000 of spectacle. It should mean something. She shook my hand before going back inside. I drove home feeling like something fundamental had changed, even if I couldn't yet see where it was leading. Update 3, 3 months later. I wasn't sure I was going to post this final update, but I think I need to, for closure and because so many of you asked. The wedding happened last weekend. It wasn't the $180,000 farm-to-table spectacular my parents originally envisioned. It was smaller, more intimate, and more meaningful than anything they could have bought. Here's what happened in between. True to her word, Maya pushed Derek into therapy. He started seeing someone about 2 weeks after our confrontation at my parents' house. I don't know all the details, it wasn't my business, but Derek and I started talking more. Small things at first. He'd text me questions about fish, about sustainable sourcing, about whether the trout his restaurant served was actually responsibly raised. It wasn't, it turned out, which upset him more than I expected. About a month after he started therapy, Derek asked if he could visit the hatchery. I said yes. He came on a Tuesday, when we were doing health checks on the juvenile salmon. Harold was there, and the two of them hit it off immediately. Something about Harold's quiet intensity resonated with Derek in a way I hadn't anticipated. Harold showed him the rearing ponds, the monitoring systems, the careful work of maintaining water quality and tracking growth rates. He explained the genetics program, how we select for hardiness and disease resistance while maintaining genetic diversity to prevent bottlenecking. I watched my brother's face transform as he listened. This was a side of food he'd never considered, not the finished plate, but the years of work that preceded it. The decades of science. The institutional knowledge. The failures and setbacks and small victories that added up, over time, to rivers coming back to life. When we released a test batch of juvenile trout into the cold water of the stream behind the hatchery, Derek was silent for a long time. I never thought about any of this, he finally said. I thought about sourcing as a supply chain problem, not this. He gestured at the water, at the fish disappearing into the current. Not living things. Not generations of work. That's because nobody teaches it, I said. Culinary schools teach you to cook. They don't teach you where food comes from before it hits the kitchen. They should, he said. They really should. That visit changed something. Derek started calling me regularly, not just to ask questions, but to talk. He apologized, multiple times, 4 years of dismissal and condescension. He told me about what he was learning in therapy, how he'd built his identity around being the talented one, because he'd always felt like he was competing with me academically and professionally, and winning in the creativity domain was the only way he knew to feel valuable. Mom and Dad reinforced it, he said during one of our calls. They made it into this whole narrative where you were the practical one and I was the artistic one, and I leaned into it because it felt good. But it wasn't fair to you. It was never fair to you. I told him I appreciated that. I also told him that I forgave him, not because I'd forgotten, but because I could see he was genuinely trying to change. Our parents were slower to come around. My dad still makes occasional comments about how I could do more with my skills, whatever that means. My mom has started asking genuine questions about my work, though, and she actually came to the hatchery last month for a tour. She cried when Harold told her about the Clearwater River restoration. I didn't know, she kept saying. I didn't understand. I don't know if she'll ever fully understand. But she's trying, and that's something. The wedding itself was held at a small venue about 2 hours outside the city, an old farm with a pond and a beautiful view of the mountains. The guest list was trimmed from 200 people to 60. The budget was about $35,000 total, mostly covered by Derek and Maya's savings plus my parents' original contribution. And the menu featured fish from my hatchery. Maya designed the whole thing around the concept of source to plate. Every ingredient traced back to its origin, with notes on the menu explaining where each component came from and who had raised or grown it. The trout course included a small card with a photo of our rearing ponds and a brief explanation of sustainable aquaculture. I won't lie, I teared up a little when I saw it. But the part that broke me was Derek's toast. He stood up after dinner, looking nervous but determined, and he started talking about food. About what it meant to him, about why he'd become a chef, about the joy of transforming raw ingredients into something that brought people together. Then he looked at me. For most of my life, I thought my job was about transformation, he said. About elevating things. Making them better than they were. I thought that's what made what I do special. He paused, collecting himself. But I've learned something this year. Transformation isn't magic. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Every ingredient I've ever touched existed because someone, somewhere, devoted their life to making sure it could exist. Farmers, fishermen, scientists, conservationists. He raised his glass toward me. People like my brother. The room was quiet. Marcus doesn't just raise fish. He helps bring rivers back to life. He helps maintain populations that were nearly extinct. He does work that will matter for generations after we're both gone. And I spent most of my life dismissing that because I didn't understand it. He walked over to where I was sitting. I understand it now. Or I'm starting to. And I want to say, in front of everyone here, thank you, Marcus. Thank you for making my art possible through your science. I couldn't do what I do without people like you. None of us could. I stood up and hugged him. It was the first real hug we'd shared in years. The rest of the evening was beautiful. Maya's family, many of whom I'd never met, asked me questions about the hatchery all night. Harold came as my +1, and he spent an hour talking to Maya's grandmother about salmon migration patterns. My parents sat together, mostly quiet, but my dad shook my hand before he left and said, "I'm proud of you, Marcus." I should have said that a long time ago. It wasn't perfect. Healing never is. But it was real. Since the wedding, Derek and Maya have approached me about partnering on something bigger. They want to start a series of educational events, sustainable seafood workshops that combine cooking demonstrations with information about aquaculture and conservation. The first one is scheduled for next month at a community center in the city. I'm going to talk about hatchery operations and restoration ecology. Derek's going to demonstrate how to prepare sustainably sourced fish. Maya's handling the marketing and outreach. We're calling it, From Source to Plate, Understanding the Full Story of Sustainable Food. The response has been overwhelming. We've already had inquiries from 3 local schools about bringing students to the hatchery for field trips. A food magazine wants to write about the partnership. Harold is over the moon. He's been talking about starting educational programs for years, but never had the culinary connections to make it work. I don't know where all of this will lead. But I know that something that started as one of the most painful experiences of my life has turned into something I never expected. Partnership, respect, and a shared commitment to helping people understand where their food really comes from. Last week, Derek sent me a photo. It was from the first day he visited the hatchery. Harold had taken it without either of us noticing. In the picture, Derek and I are standing at the edge of the rearing pond, watching the juvenile salmon school in the clear water. We're both smiling. "Thanks for teaching me what matters," he wrote under the photo. "Every part of the chain deserves respect. I'm glad I finally learned that." I printed the photo and hung it next to the one Harold gave me, the salmon running in the Clearwater River. 2 generations. 2 kinds of work. Both essential. Both worth celebrating. Final edit. Thank you to everyone who followed this story and offered support. Harold wanted me to pass along a message to all of you. In this work, we're all in it together. The scientists, the chefs, the educators, the people who just care. Every part of the chain matters. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. I think that's the lesson in all of this, if there is one. We spend so much time ranking contributions, deciding whose work is creative and whose is just maintenance, whose achievements deserve celebration and whose deserve dismissal. But everything is connected. The chef needs the farmer. The farmer needs the scientist. The scientist needs the policymaker. The policymaker needs the voter. None of us exist in isolation. I didn't get an apology from everyone who hurt me. I'm not sure my parents fully understand, even now, how deeply their words affected me. But I have something better than a perfect resolution. I have a relationship with my brother that's more honest and more meaningful than anything we had before. I have a family that's at least trying to change. I have work that matters, surrounded by people who see its value. And I have a wall full of photos reminding me who I am. That's enough. TLDR, refused to take out a $75,000 loan to fund my brother's wedding after my parents said his chef work elevates ingredients, while I just raise fish. Discovered through therapy and education that he'd been dismissive without understanding what sustainable aquaculture actually involves. He and his fiancée transformed their wedding into a celebration of the entire food chain, including local fish from my hatchery. We're now partners on sustainable seafood education. Every part of the food system deserves respect, even the fish guy.